Okay, so I've had my fruit wrapped up in the refrigerator. I've had this wrapped up so that it doesn't get too dry. And now it's time to add texture. Some of you have avocados or other fruit that you can just impress onto your fruit or vegetable. That texture, it pops up quite beautifully. And then the texture on top from the avocado, you can just impress that into the area where it's supposed to be. Now it's the opposite, right? So it's supposed to be concave and it's convex, but you have the general outline, and then you can just use your tools to mimic it. The shape here is not right. This is all about observing. So you want to get this shape to look like that shape, Your form at this point should be hollow, right? It's all about looking. Spend some time trying to figure out how to reproduce that. These beautiful lines here. Often when you first put a line in, it's too square. The edges should be soft on all of these. You can just go back with your finger and correct that. Now, if for some reason your fruit or vegetable is too dry, if you take a damp paper towel that's been soaked in water, notice this isn't wringing wet, right? And you can just wrap that up, cover it. I like to double wrap it in plastic and put it away for an hour or two and check it. Don't leave it overnight damp, because when you come back, what happens when you put clay in water for too long? It turns into slip. Okay, so if you use this method, you have to check it. Okay. All right, a lot of you have citrus. So how are you going to reproduce all of these little tiny pores that are on here? Looking at them, some are little, some are big. It's pretty irregular overall. So you might find that practice on a piece of clay first, right? You have your wooden tool. These are various shapes on here. Something little. I've blunted my bamboo skewer. I think it's going to be a combination of these on here. This is going to take a while. Remember that your projects and your Zoom time class should be 10 to 12 hours a week. If you're rushing through your project, you won't have the same outcomes. It takes a while to learn all this stuff. Some of the little ones, do I want the little ones to be this? That's pretty pokey, right? So I'm not sure I would use that. Blunt. Maybe I could sharpen this a little bit. But I want a variety of shapes on here. Then we also have this. So it's nice if you put your clay object right next to either the photograph or your actual object. And then you're going to want to carve this. There's this line here and here. This isn't circular, it's irregular. You can lift up or I could press in. But you can see it's going to take some time, right? If it's starting to get dry, spray it with water, or just dampen it with water a little bit so you can manipulate it. I'm going to want to carve that a little bit. I want it to sink in a little bit, so I'm actually pressing in. If your structure is so solid that you can't manipulate the shape, you can put a little hole in it with your needle tool, poke into the air chamber, and like a balloon, you can let some of that air out and squish it, and then patch it back up for now. When you're done, you're going to have to put that hole back in, otherwise it'll crack. But until you're done keeping it wrapped up, you want to keep that hole covered. What tool to use, you have to decide. You have to see what you like. What you don't want is anything boxy. Like if you just go like that, that's not natural. But you could gently curve those edges, or take your sponge and soften them. Fruit or vegetables, there's nothing boxy on this except the cut that you make. Like this cut is pretty boxy, right? You can go in with your tools, soften it with your finger. And then there's additional little ones around here too, right? If you need to add a little bit, slip, score, compress, and lute, right? I just want to add a little bit more. I'm going to score both of these. Add a little bit of slip. What is slip? Watery clay. And I'm compressing it with my tool. So you can see it's going to take a while to really get this. I'm going to put it back so the shapes match. All right, and now the interior, how are you going to do that? This needs to be delineated. And the truth is you're not going to mimic it exactly, right? But there does need to be some delineation on this. This is hollow, and yours should be hollow by the time you're doing details. What about this beautiful thing here? This kind of lovely line. So I'm looking at that, and I'm just trying to follow it. Then I have to clean it up. There's also all these little delicate little surfaces, and notice these little things here, these little cells going on. Play with the tools, play with things around you, play with sticks. You know, how am I going to represent that? Is it an impression in? It's basically a thin layer of that rind that goes, it's irregular and it's different sizes. And these are a little bit longer, but it's a teardrop shape. How am I going to do that? The sense of the grapefruit, right? Some of you also mentioned that they weren't fitting together well. You can carve some off. Scrape some off. You can start again. If it's too puffy, put the hole in it, squish it down, squish it into shape, cover that hole up. When you're done putting all the surface design on, and you're not going to wrap it in plastic anymore, that's when you need to put the hole back in. Let's say I'm completely done with this. Anywhere there's an air chamber has to have a hole. Why? And where am I going to put the hole? How am I going to display this? Like this? Then I'm going to put the hole in the bottom when I'm completely done. I usually like to put 2, but you only need 1. It's just in case. Is there a logical place? A logical place for a hole is right in the stem. It has to go into the air chamber. Why? As your clay, when you're all done and you're ready for it to dry, or you're going to paint, clay shrinks. That water's evaporating. The clay will shrink about 8 to 10%. When that's happening, if you don't have a hole in it, you'll develop cracks. Also, when it goes into the kiln, the air inside this chamber starts to move and expand like boiling water, and it will crack your piece. So when you're done with all the texture, put the hole in it. Okay. All right, you're not done with it, and it's getting a little dry. I'm sitting outside. Spray it a little bit. Not so much that it's going to turn into slip. It's those little details that are going to make your piece. Soften your edges. Get that shape. I made this a little larger. You're welcome to make it larger, but remember, your fruit should minimally be 5 to 8 inches. 5 inches is less than, a little less than my hand, 8 inches, okay? I guess it could be about grapefruit size. I'll accept 4. I'll accept 4 inches, okay? You can see this still needs more details. I'm gonna wrap it up. It's getting a little dry. I still need to put texture in it. When you're shaping it, look at your piece. This isn't a ball. It's kind of elongated.